Different Life Story, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. And today, another day for an interview, and I have got Maureen Cavanagh back. Maureen is the author of If You Love Me. If you haven't bought that book after the last interview I've done with her, you really need to think hard. So go out there, homework, buy her book. It's absolutely bloody gorgeous because it's a mother's journey through her daughter's opioid addiction. And it's written with such a grit, with such an honesty. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So it's a great, great, great book for any person who deals with someone they love who is in the throes of addiction. Because it doesn't matter if it is opiates, if it is alcohol, if it is other drugs, we are all the same. We love the person, but we hate what the person is doing. And there is so much trauma associated with that. And guys, if you haven't listened to Maureen's interview, go back. It is absolutely stunning. But today we've got Maureen back, and because she has become a force to be reckoned with out there. She made sense out of her journey because she decided to speak up. And I think once you have done that once, it is something very, very, very cool to do, because suddenly you make sense out of this trauma that has come to you. And Maureen, you have been a teacher. You taught us or told us that in the previous interview. But in summary, you have been a woman who loves facts and who has been educating herself very aggressively after you found out that your daughter was dealing with the demon of heroin. So today I want to use your beautiful brain, and actually let's talk about the figures that you have come across and about the impact on society of heroin. Let's talk actually honest about it. Now, not as a personal journey, but let's look at the reality. So today, an in-depth reality check of the opioid crisis in the United States and what is happening right now with COVID and the consequences that we see in the addiction field. Maureen, thank you so much for coming back onto my show.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Maureen, you, first of all, are in the United States, which has been, unfortunately, one of the countries where opioid addiction has been highlighted the most. Why was that actually the case? What made America so special? What was why? How did it come all about? What is your take on those things?
I mean, just a lack of regulation, I think, and greed. Greed on behalf of Purdue Pharmaceuticals and the Sackler family, and McKinsey, the consulting firm that helped them to distribute these opioids to, enough to kill whole towns in when it was obvious that they were doing something wrong, and they could see that huge quantities of drugs were going to certain doctors in certain towns. They came up with a formula. McKinsey, this is a big consulting group in the United States, came up with like a formula that they could use to push more where they were already going. So, I mean, and then the greed on the doctors' behalf, the greedy people that were making money off of this. And they just flooded the market with opioids. And then when they started to pull back on the opioids, then there was the underground market, and people started going to heroin because the opioids were too expensive, the pills. And now we have fentanyl, which is even, I believe it's cheaper and more deadly. So, I mean, this is really, this was a man-made problem, right? There was just so much of the opioids, so much heroin out there that it became so easy to find, especially after we started to pull back a little bit and regulate the opioids, that people gravitated towards that. So, now Purdue and the Sackler family are trying to get out of paying for this. They've filed for bankruptcy. They've trying to protect their own assets. But there have been some settlements, and McKinsey, the consulting group, just settled as well. And hopefully some of this money will go to help people that are currently addicted and their families to find help. But I mean, the damage they've done, and these people will never suffer the way they should. They should be criminally prosecuted for this.
And I think that is such a good statement. I remember 10 years or so ago, there was a television series, The Glades, and it was basically a big town cop goes back to where he grew up in the Everglades in Florida. And I remember watching that series, and there was not a single episode in that series where not someone did oxycodone. Someone wanted to go to a party. Okay, let's have an oxycodone and have a drink. Then let's go to the party. Or let's have some sex with a stranger. Come on, shall we share an oxycodone and then have sex? And I thought, what the hell? But what did I miss? And that was, so for this phenomenon to come into the more or less accepted television, that's live in the United States. What the hell? So that
it was just so much. I mean, you go and get your tooth out and you were given 30 Vicodin, or, you have a root canal, you're given 30 oxycodone. You break your arm, you're given 60. I mean, you could have your arm ripped off and you wouldn't need 60.
Yeah.
It's just so the overprescribing on top of just the illegal overprescribing. Just the idea was that, and it's Purdue influenced that scale, the pain scale, 1 to 10. They were involved in that. So, and everybody was a 10, 9, everybody walking around, but there was nothing to base it on. So you were 9 to 10, you got some oxycodone. Now you get lots more. We can give us a call, we'll give you more. And we're confused as to how that happened. I mean, it just was, it was a mess here. It's gotten a little bit better, but now it's gone in the other direction too. So people have legitimate pain, and then they're being looked at as drug seeking when they have. So it's just, I don't know where it's going or what's going to happen with this, but it's not good.
So I think as a doctor, I want to say a few words, and as an anesthetist who prescribes opiates on a daily basis and uses them in virtually every single patient as part of their operation, as part of going through some very painful procedures. The opiates in their own right are godsend. They are beautiful, and without them, modern anesthetics would be not pretty whatsoever. Okay, so let's not throw the child out with the bathwater. And opiates in their own right are good things, and that means for the right patient, under the right circumstances, and in the right time, under the right setting, i.e. supervision, etc. The problem, of course, comes in when people realize that opiates, regardless of it is morphine, oxycodone, codeine, heroin, all of these, they actually take the emotional pain away as well. And they make you feel good. You don't have to deal with the trauma from your childhood. You don't have to deal with the shit that is your life. And suddenly you take it for not the right reasons. And it actually makes you feel good. It's this beautiful numbing effect. And you just don't give a damn anymore. What nicer could there be when you live a life that maybe is not so nice? So that is where this comes from. And it's not a new phenomenon. Let's be quite clear. I mean, why did the English get so much into China? It was an opium war, essentially. We're talking 18th, 19th century, that opium dens were all the rage. People were hanging around and were smoking their opium and were completely not stoned. They were, under the influence. And it was in brutal times, just as much as there were the gin palaces, and just addiction has been around all the time. The problem, what we have seen in the last 25 years, however, is that, as you said, the greed. Prior to that, it was sort of, the cocaine and the heroin made in the golden triangle in Asia or in Colombia, etc. So it was criminal gangs that basically created that and then flooded the market. Now suddenly we had very respectable pharmaceutical companies who were actually going there, and those people who were actually supposed to look out for you, the doctors, became an integral part in providing this huge amount of drugs to people who were potentially at risk or who were very clearly drug seeking.
Right.
That's the huge difference. And that's what you have been alluding to. Greed is, I think, there. We were saying in the preamble to this talk, we were discussing that there is actually a large geographic component to that, because if you look at where 80% of the oxycodone was sold, it was really down there, Florida and the lower part of the United States, the East. Why was that?
I mean, well, I think it was because the regulations were even more lax. They weren't paying. There was nobody watching.
Right.
There was nobody watching, and the people that were watching were turning a blind eye. Because that's why we have all the treatment centers in Florida, and we had such a mess down in Florida with the treatment centers. The more money and greed followed the overprescribing. But there's a route that people would drive, and I can't think off the top of my head what they would call it, but down to Florida and back again, they were putting buses of people down there to go down to these doctors and get prescriptions and bring them back up again.
Kidding
me?
Can
you imagine? No. No. I mean, there's a great book by Beth Macy called she's a fabulous author. I can't think of the name of it, but she talks about where one of like ground zero almost in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of books that have been written about those particular areas where this was, where the overprescribing started. People that worked in coal mines and had back issues. So they started prescribing, and then they started overprescribing, and then whole towns became just inundated with all of these drugs, and then people started coming there looking for the drugs. I mean, it's not rocket science, right?
Let me play devil's advocate. If now drugs become so easily available through nefarious doctors, what was the impact on the gangs? Was there less violence? Because ultimately, what you could argue is that now you basically take the financial drive out of the gangs to sell their drugs.
Well, you can always sell it cheaper, right? You can sell it cheaper. You can sell it more potent. You can. I mean, there's always,
So
there's always a reason.
So the free availability was not translating into a drop in crime or gang activity, etc.
Because eventually it started to become very obvious there was a problem, and there started to be tighter regulations. And when the tighter regulations came along, people turned to the illegal drugs such as heroin and fentanyl.
Yeah. And then therefore, actually, the gangs were saying, thank you very much. You got them addicted. Now we carry on. Hey, we are your friends. Yeah. Okay. No, that, of course, makes a lot of sense. So we had oxycodone, and that was the main problem. We are talking now 90s, early 2000s, that sort of started appearing. But nowadays we are talking fentanyl, we're talking heroin. What is your take on how this journey, this meandering from drug to drug actually occurred? And for me, the question as an anesthetist, fentanyl I use every single day. And it is so hard regulated, for crying out loud. If someone drops an ampule, the paper war around that. Well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it is no. We are very, very careful. So there's no way that someone nicks some fentanyl and then goes out to sell it. There's no way in hell. So where the hell is it coming from? Yeah.
They're creating it in China, in Mexico. It's coming into the United States. They're probably creating it in the United States too. But and it's coming in as a substitute for heroin.
Mm.
And when people are making things, they're not chemists, you know what I mean?
No.
It's some, jamoke in his garage making this. And then they're pressing it into pills too. So we have a lot of pressed fentanyl here that's supposed to be a million different things, and it's actually fentanyl.
And then they are using it and doing it over a spoon, or how do people
They're
actually
selling
use
it. Yeah, they're selling it and using it as if it was whatever drug they thought they were buying.
Yeah. So it comes in the pressed form, but then how do you use it? How do addicts?
So it depends. I mean, if it's a benzo, you would, take it the way you would take a benzo, but it's fentanyl made by some guy in his garage, and it's killing people. And they thought they were taking one thing, and meanwhile they're taking another.
Well, that's of course the big thing. There was a beautiful study from the UK, actually probably 20 years ago now, where one Saturday night the research team went out to rave parties and bought ecstasy tablets, bought 24, I think, ecstasy tablets, and took them to the lab and actually analyzed what was in there. And I think 2 or 3 of them had ecstasy in there. Anything else was possible, from talcum powder, and nothing to ketamine, 200 milligrams, or horse tranquilizer, to all kind of other shit. So you have no idea what you're getting on the street, and that's the problem. The other thing I want to teach the listeners who have no idea maybe about opiates, or haven't got the depth of understanding that we two have. Fentanyl is a very, very potent drug. Now that drug, if I inject a dose for an anesthetic, it has a small therapeutic window. So between pain relief and you stopping breathing, that's not such a big jump there. So it is highly, highly potent. It's working very quick, and therefore it goes very quickly into your system. No surprise you get this quick high, but it acts a very short time, 20, 30 minutes, something like that, depending on the amount that you're injecting. Whilst heroin might actually work, several hours. So, and is less potent, less of an issue. So, not that I condone one or the other. I just want to teach you that what the differences are. And you're suddenly playing no longer with something where you can make a little mistake. If you make a little mistake with fentanyl, you're dead. And I think that's...
So, I mean, it's a great business plan too, right? Because you're getting people higher, and you are getting them to use more frequently.
Exactly right. So even if it is cheaper, because it's such a short time that it lasts, it becomes a full-time activity to inject, and of course to get the money to inject. Do you know what is the current price for fentanyl? Do you know?
I don't, but I know that there's very little heroin in the area that I'm in.
Yeah.
In the Northeast, it's all fentanyl.
Which is so bizarre. So bizarre.
But it's made not in a lab. This is not, medical grade fentanyl. It's made somewhere else.
Have you got a grasp on the extent of the fentanyl wave that is hitting America? How many people are actually admitting to using fentanyl? Do you have any data? Do you know anything?
I don't
know.
No, that I don't know. But I will tell you that I think we talked about this before, that we're expecting last year was about 82,000 people passed from an overdose, from an opioid overdose. So when you look at, I always show pictures of the Super Bowl, and that's about 82,000 people.
Wow.
So if you picture a Super Bowl stadium, football stadium here in the United States, completely full, that's about 82,000 people. Now picture every one of those people has about 5 people that they will grieve heavily for this person, between 1 and 5. But so then compound that by all the people whose lives will be changed because that person is no longer with us. And you can kind of see the extent of the pain that this is causing.
And it's for sure not getting easier. because ultimately, why do we use? Because we are in trouble. We want to numb the pain in our lives, and COVID, unfortunately, will have had such an impact on many families with regards to financial problems, with regards to losing jobs. We here in Rotorua, we have got a very strong focus on tourism, and many of the places had to lay off a lot of people, actually, because there's just no more busloads of Chinese and Korean tourists coming through. So it has changed our setting here quite tremendously. And no doubt it will have done exactly the same in the United States for different reasons in different settings. So there we are. So trauma is not getting less, if at all, it has been getting worse. So one previous guest said to me, she doesn't say what the fuck anymore. She says, what the 2020, or get the 2020 out of here. So we were thinking 2020 is really the bad thing. I mean, actually, fairness, 2021 is not much better, is it, so far?
No, it looks a lot like 2020, actually.
Exactly. Exactly for you guys out there.
Hopefully we're seeing the other side of it. And, you know, this is going to have an impact on children that have been isolated for the last year. Who knows what the impact that's going to be? But we also have, you know, when you talk about 82,000 people, probably half of those people have children.
Yeah.
So those are children growing up without parents. This is devastating. This is devastating.
It is huge. And the 82,000 are those people that we know about, where very clearly autopsies were done and where it was more or less clear. There's probably a sort of a gray figure out there where people were labeled to have died of other causes, where very much addiction might have contributed to either those causes, or which were addicted but another disease ravaged them first. So I think there is probably an undercurrent there that is stronger than what we recognize. We only see the deaths, and we don't see all the other things there that are around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you go to schools nowadays, what is the response that you're getting?
Well, you know, people, I talk a lot to parent groups, and it's always, especially at a school, people don't like to admit that this is happening. They want to hide their head. There's the schools, there's a real reluctance on even bringing the subject out because it's kind of admitting that there's a problem, which, heads up, there's a problem everywhere. So there's no way that there's not a problem. And even if there's not a problem in the moment, you still have people that are going to go out into the world. You want to educate their families, you want to educate them. And then you have the problem of the stigma of actually showing up for something like this, right? Because if you go, then maybe that means that you need the help. Or if it's not that, then you're the families that are coming, that aren't afraid, that will sit in the audience and learn something, are the families that don't need to know it. You know, it's the family that kind of, maybe they have this in their family. I'm not going there. Everybody will know. So it's really hard to educate in the schools. It's a difficult thing to get in there with. What, in my opinion, what they need to do here in the United States, you have to go to a meeting before your kids play sports. Now, they don't talk about opioids in the meeting, and if they do, they talk about it quickly. They tell you all the things that you have to do and the things you're responsible for and all that kind of stuff. You also, at the end of the year, they'll have a prom or, you know, big dance at the end of the year. And you have to go, before your kids go to prom, you have to go to a meeting and you have to sit through this, you know, all what's going to happen. They need to take both of those and include an hour on prevention. So that this way families are in there because they have no choice, because they're going to go to this thing regardless and for another reasons, and let them get educated on prevention. But, you know, I haven't been able to make that inroad yet.
If there is such a strong current of opioid addiction, and looking in your press, it's not hidden away, is it? It's there, bang,
No.
bang, bang. Just another, I don't know how many 100 people died this month on there, bigger than the road toll, etc., etc., etc. So yet there is this, according to you, this kind of hesitation to address that problem when it matters most with the young people. I can't understand that. Is there, when you come to some schools here, there are big signs, and I keep forgetting them. So it's typically acronyms, so stop and dare. Oh no, I'm struggling to come up. It's basically dare, DARE. Oh damn it. It's basically things to highlight the issue of drug addiction and
Mhm.
to give the children something to hold on to. No, we stand for integrity. We stand for truth. We stand for these kind of things. These are our values, and drugs don't fit with us, and kind of a thing. So there's this kind of very very overt, very clear message there. No, we are against drugs. We will speak out.
Mhm.
There's not such a thing over there.
It's here. It depends, like there's here and there, here and there. What we need to be doing is educating young people on the physiology of addiction.
Hmm.
We need to teach them what happens and in a person's brain that is completely and totally out of their hands,
Hmm.
right? So if they think that they can control it, we know as young people, right? They think every young person thinks they're special, right? And they think that this is the reason why they drive fast, the reason why they drink and drive, right? This is the reason they do all the things, because that prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that governs logic and reason and executive functioning and planning and all those things, they're not thinking out like that, right? But we have to give them information, so this way they can't say, well, this is I mean, nobody tells a young person that part of your brain is not developed, which is why you can't rent a car, which is why that certain things you can't sign a contract for until you're a certain age. We have to explain to kids what happens in their brain, regardless of how smart you are, what color you are, what your family is like. All of these things happen to everybody. So when they understand that, maybe, and what happens when you smoke pot, what happens when you drink alcohol, what happens when you do heroin, and when we can start to show them that that you're affecting the dopamine production in your brain, and that is totally out of your control. You can't control that. And that the fact is that if we wait until we're 24 to ever do anything, we have a much lower chance of becoming addicted to anything. But we have to start, we have to start explaining these things, not just say this is bad, don't do it. Well, that just would make me want to do it if I was young, right? But we have to do this with parents too. There's these two researchers in the United States, a team, but the two leads are Bradshaw and Shumway, and they're out of the University of Texas Tech. They've done some of this research on the brains of parents that are impacted by or loved one that's impacted by someone else's substance use disorder. I love this because when I first read this, I was like, oh my God, somebody actually gives a shit about what's happening in my brain, because I'm now, and if you've read the book, I was out of my mind. I was, totally working on the lizard brain, right? It was all about the lizard brain. There was no, I wasn't thinking clearly. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I was just sick. I say sick, and I mean probably as sick as she was. And I stumbled upon this research, and they did functional MRI testing on the brains of a family members, those that rated themselves as having a low level of codependency, high family functioning, all the way to the families that were totally immersed, completely, enmeshed with their loved one. And the people that they would show an image to a family that was completely sucked in, and the brain would light up. Like it was like, and I always picture my brain was probably like Las Vegas on a Saturday night. It was like all the parts of the brain that govern, you know, whether you're going to work off the amygdala, that kind of, you know, that fight or flight, just do this. All of those parts were lighting up, but coincidentally, it's not coincidentally, it makes perfect sense that this is the same part of the brain that lights up in with somebody who has an addiction, that lights up when they have a craving. So you see the brain of a parent that is said, they're shown this picture of their loved one getting into treatment, and they're like, oh my God, I'll do anything to get them into treatment. That part of the brain lights up. That it's the same part of the brain that lights up during a craving. Sure. So when I'm working with parents, I say, you know what? Now you know what a craving feels like. Right? Because they don't understand why Johnny was on his way to court and he used on his way to court. It's like, what are you doing? That doesn't even make any sense. But it does if you think about it like that. Yeah. That's the thing that drove me to try to kill somebody with a baseball bat, which I typically don't do. But so, I mean, it's not usually how I operate. But it's that hijack, you know, but it's now parents know what a craving feels like when they hear this. Yeah. And so we also know that, you know, something's going on that's beyond our control, but we have to start sharing this information with people, both parents and young people, so that they can make informed decisions. Because when I understood this, I started to find ways, just like we teach people when they're in treatment and have a craving, how to fight the craving. Well, I had to learn ways to fight the craving too, because my brain was not working. So there are things you can do, or it was working, but it was not being effective. And I had to teach my things that I can do when I get into that space that brings that thinking part of your brain back online. Just like we do when someone's in recovery, to teach them those things to fight the craving.
It's beautiful how you draw the parallel there in between what is happening in the loved one and what is happening in the addict. And that again, if we accept that as a given, you then wonder why we do not address the family more as part of the treatment, as part of the treatment plan. I certainly found that an issue when I went into rehab. I had these 4 glorious weeks of beautiful care, self-discovery, where people really helping me for one of the worst times in my life. And I had all this beautiful support. Meanwhile, my wife and my children went back to school. She was worrying about the additional costs that the rehab was costing, all those kind of things. She was with the nose to the grindstone, very little support, not necessarily due to the treatment program. They were just in a different town. She couldn't just come on the Wednesday night to the family evening, etc. So it was just, there were logistical problems there.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, even if that had occurred, even if she was living next to that center, there would have only been a Wednesday night family meeting and maybe some visiting.
Everybody probably would have held hands and just told their story and not become educated.
Yeah, something like that. They were actually very good. They were actually using a very similar system as you have, with some education to start off with, etc. So I know that. But even then, we are talking, 4 weeks of 2 hours for them, compared with, well, I was basically going to school, so to speak, from the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where I had lectures and self-improvement and things like that. So it was 8 hours a day that I was immersed in rehabilitation. And just compare these two settings. And right. I think my rehab was very outstanding. Also, just with those 2 hours of value to the family. Many other rehabs don't even have the money or the setup to look after the relatives. Is that your impression as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're mostly private treatment in the United States. So you have to have your own insurance, or you have to be able to pay cash for that. And when I was going through this with my daughter, she walked into over 40 different treatment opportunities, I like to call them. And of those 40 different times she went into treatment, I was offered 3 family meetings with a counselor, and it was all around discharge planning. Zero education.
Are you
So
kidding?
no, and we had excellent insurance, and she went to really good places. So I'm not saying that there isn't anywhere that was doing it, but I didn't receive any. And I'm fairly vocal in my needs, so I was asking for help, but I was not receiving any. And this is the reason why I do what I do, because it just doesn't exist here. And
when was that, Maureen? When was that? What time frame are we talking about?
Oh, not that, a while ago, but not that 4 years ago.
All right,
8 years ago.
Oh,
So it's not a million years ago.
Yeah. Shit, you would have expected that people recognize that. I mean, for us too, it is as
greed.
Clear as the sky, and
it's more greed. You know what I mean? But the problem is this is a simple fix. You can do this and offer it to the community, but they're just not doing it, and they need to be made to do it. And they need to be shamed into doing it. Up for the job, or if they need to be helped, I can help with that too. Yeah. But either way, this is going to happen because it just takes a couple of really good places or good treatment centers and good people to turn the tide. Because once one does it, they all have to follow.
Scary.
It's unfortunate, it's unfortunate that they don't see the value in that, but, and some people have said to me that it's because they want them to come back. They're happy, and that's, ridiculous. There's no shortage of people that need to go into treatment. So that can't possibly be it. But there has to be some kind of, there needs to be family help for the entire family, because what's happening is we have people, and usually in the United States, it's 21 days, 28 days, something like that. And they're coming back to families that are honestly sicker than they were when they left, because we've been white knuckling it. We've been holding our breath, waiting for the person to come home. And when they come home, our loved ones come home all shiny and new, right? We have no education, and we can screw you up in about 10 seconds and bring you right back down. So that's not effective. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in any way. So I'm not quite sure why we haven't gotten that yet.
I haven't taken so far that into consideration, actually. Now that you say it, it is so blatantly obvious that I was blessed because I had a supportive family and they were there for me. But I mean, for me, as when I came home, I somehow expected fanfares and rose petals in my way for all the hard work that I've done. Guess what? They were very cagey and thinking, right. How many times has he lied that he would stop and things like that? So there was, of course, there were months of probably years of my wife still from now and then smelling my breath and doing things like that to figure out, you look a bit funny today. Oh, no, okay. And it was, it was there. It was what it was, because as addicts, we do not so nice things. And one of them is we lie. Whenever our lips move, we probably have lied. So the family has heard it all before. So there is that.
But that's a symptom of the addiction,
Correct.
And hopefully when someone gets into recovery, that's no longer an issue. But boy, if you want to send somebody backwards, all you have to do is treat them like they're still an active addiction.
Exactly.
I mean, that's, and it's hard not to do. But what we need to, this is my perfect scenario. I do work as a family recovery coach. I work with families one-on-one. I had this family that their son was in treatment in Ireland, and he was doing really well, but there was no plan to reintegrate him back. Now he had, I think, 4 or 5 months in Ireland, in this treatment center in Ireland. And which is great because you really, I mean, this is another thing that families don't know anything about post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and that it can last up to 2 years.
Mm.
And we expect that, you know, you were away for 4 weeks, and, you know, Aunt Jean had her appendix out and she's fine now. So you must be fine after 4 weeks. You had plenty of time. It only took her a week and a half, and she was mowing the lawn, you know. But it doesn't work like that. It can take up to 2 years for somebody's dopamine levels and serotonin to be back to normal again. So I mean, we're not taking into any of those things into consideration. So this family had realized that when he came home, they were going to need to get educated. And when he came home, they were going to need to have a plan. But this wasn't part of the treatment center's like ideas. So we did 6-7 weeks of education and trying to make a plan with him, because
Beautiful.
I don't know if this is the same kind of wording there, but people talk about contracts. We're going to sign a family contract. We're going to sign a contract. No, you don't. You need to have a working agreement, because everybody's got to buy into it, right? You have to have the family needs to buy into it. And the person that is in treatment did not become an imbecile. They are still able to make decisions. They're still the same person you loved. They just have an illness. We don't take all their power away and tell them what to do now. That's not going to work. Because nobody buys into that. So there has to be buy-in from both sides. We need to sit down, make this plan, and understand what life is going to look like when they come home, and be ready for the problems. And that's why we educate ourselves and make the decisions when everything is good. So we know what it's going to look like if it doesn't and this way we don't have to try to micromanage people, because from my experience, people that are in treatment are much harder on themselves. So if you say, well, what's going to happen if you get high again? And they'll be much tougher than even you would have come up with. So we make the plan when everybody is well. And so this family did everything right. They had everybody involved in it. They had the 2 brothers, the girlfriend, everybody was in on it. They made the plan with him, and they had everything in place. They had a therapist in place. It was wonderful. And just the other day, the son called me to see if I would give him some advice. He really wants to work in treatment someday, and
excellent.
become a counselor.
Yeah.
So this is how it works when it works, you know. And it's not rocket science. It's common sense. And these are like the things that I realized when my daughter was going through this, and I didn't get any of those things. What would have made it better, you know? And I think we have to start looking at that, because it's obvious. Longer term, at least, and family involvement and education for prevention and building resiliency and those types of things for young people. It's not enough to tell them drugs are bad. We have to teach young people what happens, what goes on, the actual science behind it. And we also have to teach people how to be resilient so they don't try for the first time. I mean, these are all no-brainers, just we're not doing it for some reason.
But again, you have highlighted the necessary steps, and they are logical for you and me who have been there. We have, like a snake, shed off that skin of shame and guilt and taboo, and we have dropped that outside. We have dropped that, and we are willing to learn. We are willing to engage. We're willing to be honest, due to our experiences, because we figured out that by doing exactly that, being honest and being open, that's how you change things. But that is not necessarily something that our society is doing well. There are certain subgroups which are doing it really well. Typically, those people who are in recovery, for example, or the loved ones of them. But if we say that 95% of alcoholics will deny that they have any problem, that also extrapolates that these 95% will probably not seek treatment. So therefore, here you've got 1 in 20 who are seeking treatment. The others deny it and are not ready yet. If we now say the same thing for schools, the 1 in 20 who are actually doing something. For the workplace, 1 in 20. And then, let's be honest here, the workplace is the only reason they start doing something is because occupational health and safety sometimes forces them. We have got a huge bush and timber industry here. And when you work with machines that are bigger than my house, then, well, surprise, surprise, you're not very good when you're actually high, drunk, or a mixture thereof. So the drug testing came in because we had deaths in this kind of industry, because people were doing stupid things. But that was not because the employer said, oh, we really want to do the right thing. No, that is because occupational health and safety forced them to. So there is this lack of awareness and lack of, I shouldn't say lack of awareness. Deep down, probably a lot of people know that there's so many of us who are in trouble, but it's a lack of willingness to engage and to tackle a problem that seems so insurmountable as a task. So, and it's so multifaceted. And the schools are saying, why should we, we are here for the academic kind of side, and we don't have the funding to have a school nurse or 5 school nurses, all of which are counselors and are able to deal with the young people. There is no funding on that. They don't know how to get their science lab sorted, leave alone that kind of side of things. So they say, no, that should be the parents. And the parents say, no, sorry, I'm working the whole day. And in the evening, for Christ's sake, when do I get a bit of a timeout? It's all that. So it's always someone else's job, isn't it?
I mean, but unless we all decide collectively as a society that this is important. Exactly. And I think that the more we go out and we speak, and people like you and I that are out there speaking, and get rid of that stigma, that will be accepted. But I was a special education teacher, a middle school special education teacher. So that happy age around 13, I was a special education teacher, and my specialty was kids with a language-based learning disability. So I learned to teach in lots of different ways, and their requirements for the extra services that they needed interfered with their ability to be able to learn the general curriculum, because there's only so many hours in the day. So I would take the general curriculum and take those things that they needed, those special services, and use the general curriculum to was part of me doing that. Okay, so this is something we should be doing in the schools. So part of the science curriculum, it doesn't have to be separate. Part of the science curriculum should be learning about the physiology of addiction. And we should be teaching this from the time kids are very young, all through the grades, and little bit harder, little bit more intense, until we get to the age of around 6th grade, 7th grade, when we can really be talking about what's going on in somebody's brain. There's ways of putting this into the general curriculum when it's such a tremendous problem. And if you add all addictions together, it's a tremendous problem. It may not be the same drugs, but we have a huge problem in this world with addiction, and we should be doing these things. And it's a can't lose situation. You teach kids in their gym class or PE, whatever you call, I don't know what you call it there, but in their physical education class, that how to meditate. Meditation is the answer for trauma, for addiction, for feelings of disconnection, for just learning how to be in your body. Teach that. Do they really need to know how to play volleyball? Absolutely. I mean, if you like volleyball, that's great. But I think that there's room for this in there if we have our priorities together, and we don't. And we don't. We just keep looking at it and saying it's going to be too much money. We can't do that. Yeah, you can. We can do lots of things if we really want to. We just spend a lot of time wringing our hands saying we can't do it.
Well, you could extrapolate that. So if Johnny has got $400 a month, but his wife Mary is using $380 of that for heroin, how much has Johnny left to pay the rent? So you can do maths, you can do
everything.
That's right, exactly. So I think that, I'm facetious here, but hey, you're right. It is a matter of willingness. of
Right.
actually addressing these kind of things.
We
And
got to think out of the box a little bit,
yeah, correct.
God forbid.
But it is those kind of things. When you actually do that, you start a ripple effect. You start a butterfly effect. Little changes like that. You have no idea where they are leading to. If you were many moons ago, there was Jamie Oliver, a famous English chef,
Oh, no, I
who
know. Yeah.
yeah, that's right, and he went to poor boroughs, poor parts of the town in where he lived, and he started with one school and making school dinners, and basically educated the school dinner lady who was so far serving sizzlers of some unidentified thing they call meat there, basically shit. And
Yeah.
then they changed it, and they changed their attitude, etc., of the whole school. And suddenly the flow-on effects were enormous. Far less interruptions in class, far less sickness calls, asthma went down massively, stuff like that. So the flow-on effects of just changing nutrition and starting self-love, self-care, of highlighting actually how to look after yourself with such a simple thing. Wow. And that was one intervention.
Right.
So imagine that. Combine another little intervention, for example, a sports talk, to actually say, okay, guys, today, yes, we're going to talk about training for football, but we also talk about doping. What does it actually do? Do you really want to have penis that size and boobs that size, boys? No, then maybe the doping is not such a clever idea. And you could start with that, and then say, well, actually, if you want to be in your peak performance, yes, of course, there are drugs that make you feel stronger and maybe make you stronger. Cocaine. You do cocaine before a workout, just as much as we take a coffee before a meeting. Yeah, of
Hmm.
course. But you can talk about it in a natural way and say,
Right.
this is the stuff, what it does, and educate and highlight and show things. I think by doing so, we could raise the awareness amongst our youngsters and and strengthen their resolve. Because I certainly in my kids, when they were 3 4 years 5 years ago, when they were sort of 13 14, I asked them, hey, look, how easy is it get for you to get drugs? Very easy,
Right.
very easy. And I was astounded. And the interesting thing was they went to different schools, one of them to a public school, a public in the sense of a normal school for everyone out there. Then my other son went to a more Christian private school. Same shit,
Same
same
thing.
everywhere.
Yep.
Exactly. Drugs everywhere, easily available. Not so nice behaviors around, including bullying everywhere. But maybe in the public school there was maybe even a bit more of an interest to address it, although that is arguable. The In the other school, maybe a bit more rejection of even the thought that something like that could happen in our Christian environment.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So it was interesting. So there are so many hurdles that we need to overcome, and I commend you. I'm truly honored and humble to have met you, Maureen, because you're
Oh,
there and you're trying to make this world a little bit of a better place. One interview after the other, one book after the other. I need to show you a book again, guys out there here. Uh, if you love me, and that means so much. It's such a beautiful title, actually. If you love me, you would just stop doing that. Well, no,
how
it's not.
often do we do that, right?
Exactly.
Do you know where the title came from?
Uh,
One night after, years of this, like I said, 40 different entries into treatment, 13 overdoses that brought her blue and dead to the hospital, and probably another 20 that somewhere somebody had Narcan and reversed it. Um, she had been doing well and came home after and was living out of the house, had made some really great friends, and she had probably about 3 or 4 months. It was the longest she ever had, and disappeared. And some great sober friends went out, which sober people are the best people in the whole world because they stick together like nothing I've ever seen before. And they went out looking for her and brought her home at about 3 o'clock in the morning. She was in my house, sitting on the floor of the kitchen, dirty and crying and just, oh God, so disappointed and ashamed. And it was awful. And I looked at her and I said, sweetie, I love you so much and you're going to die. And she looked back at me and she said, if you love me, you'd let me die. And that was when I really understood how much pain she was in. And that's why I had to name the book If You Love Me, because that was probably the moment where I thought I got it, but I didn't get it. I didn't really get it. And it was the sincerity in with which she said that I knew that she really was
Meant it.
hanging on. Yeah, she was hanging on just for us, for her family. And now, for almost 4 years sober, she's just bought a car. She just signed a lease on a new apartment. She's in school. She's got a great job and was one of those people that sat by people with COVID and bathed them and combed their hair and held the phone up to them when they were in the hospital dying. She's one of those people. She works in a hospital now, and she's an amazing, amazing person. So thank God she's still here, because the world needs her. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't be any prouder of her. And I think the book is funny too, isn't it? I mean, it is funny.
It
It's
is.
hard to imagine, but it is funny.
Absolutely. And that's why I loved your style. You were so honest. You were just down to the point. There was no more hiding. I
Yeah.
hate hiding. And that was the last thing you did in this book. You were honest to the nth degree.
I
About your
had to
own.
make it funny though. You wouldn't be able to read it if I didn't have the dark, weird sense of humor that I have. I don't think people would be able to get through it. And you got to love my crazy Irish ex-husband too.
See, a lot of spoilers there. Guys, get that bloody book. Read it. No, that's brilliant. Maureen, thank you so much for again coming onto my show. You did a fantastic job in highlighting the facts about the opioid crisis in the United States. But more importantly, to point out that regardless where you are, guys, in this world, we are all the same people with all the same dopamine receptors, with all the same underlying trauma that we want to numb the pain for, and the desire to just be happy. And far too many of us are tempted to achieve that state artificially with whatever addiction we currently have. May it be overeating, may it be alcohol, may it be gambling, may it be sex. There are so many different addictions out there. They're all the same path, but some of them are more likely to kill you. And unfortunately, the opiates must be very high there on the list. And fentanyl must be even higher there on the list, because it's such a narrow window, a therapeutic window between, hey, I feel good, and hey, what are these pearly gates doing here?
Yeah.
Exactly. So therefore, thank you so much for coming onto my show. And more importantly, thank you so much for the work that you're doing out there. Please tell us again your website and the links that guests can find you.
Sure. They can find me at maureencavanagh.net. They can find the Zoom groups that we run at and the coaching services at magnoliarecoveryresources.com. And then they can find the Facebook groups at magnolianewbeginnings.org. And we're a nonprofit too, so we do lots of good work.
Brilliant. There's no doubt about that. Guys, look down there into the description of the podcast and the YouTube video, and you find her links there. Maureen, it was a beautiful, beautiful interview. Thank you again so much for coming onto my show. Thank you for your time, for your effort, for your passion, and let that light not go out. And who knows, one day your daughter might sit next to you and has come to the point in her journey where she starts to become vocal about it, and
Yeah.
this is very much on the cards. She may choose to, she may not choose to. In my experience, it is more a question of when will she choose to.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
I agree.
Which is beautiful. I can't wait. I can't wait to have her on my show then in due course.
I'll let her know. I'll let her
Exactly,
know.
exactly. Give her a big hug from me, and
I definitely will.
that's right. Cool. And you guys out there, I know if you can't hug someone directly, pick up the phone or send a text. I am thinking of you, and hang in there. Something like that can mean the world to someone. Okay. Look after yourself, guys. Bye.